weekend party. You know what I'm talking about my friend Chris Farley.
They're almost, and this is for your own good, heroes.
Welcome to Roll Credits, a podcast about connections, both in film and in life. I'm Aaron.
I'm Mandy.
Each episode, we aim to explore a cast member, actor, director, or even a concept that ties a set of movies together. We talk a little bit about the history and the context of a movie and when it was released, and we have some fun while discussing our own personal opinions about the film. And we have had a great time with this current arc. We're currently about to wrap up our Chris Farley arc. So welcome. If this is your first time listening in, go ahead, go back, listen to it from start to finish. Remember that this is an Armbar Studios production. For more information about all of our projects, you can visit armbarstudios.com. So, yes, as mentioned, we are wrapping up with our very first full-time arc. Chris Farley in Almost Heroes, a really, really enjoyable project that we have learned a lot during. For those who, haven't stuck around, we started with Tommy Boy, went to Black Sheep, went to Beverly Hills Ninja, and now this. His final film released posthumously, I believe, 5 months after
his final starring film. I think after this he had a role in the film Dirty Work, which had Norm Macdonald in it. But as far as starring films with Chris Farley, these are the big four.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And so yes, it is actually directed by Christopher Guest, which I'm sure is something that we will discuss in greater detail. This is a 1998 film, the story of the settling of America, starring a foppish young man and an alcoholic ex-army tracker as they attempt to map out the country before they can get beaten to the punch by Lewis and Clark.
It's kind of weird that this happened week of July 4th, huh?
Oh, yeah. It's kind of funny. We watched this the week of July 4th because I'm going to be honest with you, hadn't even heard of this movie until we watched it. Didn't look into it until you rented it on Amazon, which we'll discuss again. Because there's a lot of interesting things about renting this movie. But you rented it on Amazon. We watched it, and I saw the name Almost Heroes, and I thought, oh, maybe it'll be like a Kick-Ass or a Super kind of thing, sort of going on with the Beverly Hills Ninja of, maybe he was a superhero. He was not. He's a colonial settler, ex-Army Ranger, about to be executed. So, did you know anything about this movie before watching it?
Yes and no. So this is the one Chris Farley movie that I had not seen before this. Well, technically, what happened, I think I saw the ending of this one on TV. I don't think it was Comedy Central, but that's literally it.
Okay.
I do not have any fondness, any kind of memories about this one. And, I couldn't even tell you when I saw this on TV or really anything about it. I know for sure I saw the ending.
Okay. Intriguing. So this is a fascinating film, honestly, because I personally have less to say about it as a whole than I did for Black Sheep.
It is incredible. I have so much more notes here than I think any other film in terms of the Chris Farley biography, and then at the same time the least amount of notes on the film itself.
Exactly. From a metatextual standpoint and from a story surrounding the film, fascinating. It's directed by Christopher Guest. It's considered, quote, the one bad Christopher Guest film. I don't know. Some people say this, some people say that. But, I just think that was a funny quote that kind of came up in my research. And yeah, that's hell of a damning statement, to say the least. And it's Chris Farley, Matthew Perry, a lot of other people as well, all inside this film that Well, how about I tell you some contemporary or some review at the time.
Yeah, let's get into that before we actually get into the history.
Yeah, okay.
Tell me about it.
So, at the time, of course, it being a posthumous Chris Farley movie with a big-time director, normally, I would call this At the Movies at the Time. That is this segment. Another movie that neither Ebert nor Siskel from my research reviewed, but it was reviewed in Entertainment Weekly in 1998 by Owen Gleiberman, who was very unkind to this movie, as most people are. So it starts with him talking about a scene. There's a certain scene, you probably remember this, where Chris Farley is tracking a buffalo using its droppings, and he takes a big old whiff of buffalo dung. And the thing that got the reviewer was after that scene, they find the buffalo, and Chris goes back for a second whiff. And it's nasty, but it's, he has kind of a goofy look on his face. And that is like the one laugh that this person got from the movie. I think we got a few extra laughs than he did. Not very
Of
many.
all things, the buffalo scene.
Yeah, I know, of all things. But we got a few extra laughs, which we'll talk about. But he also, and this is fascinating, because this is I'm warning you, this is a cruel statement here. But I think it's necessary to kind of set the stage to think about Farley himself and how he was perceived even posthumously at the time. Was, how could director Christopher Guest, the puckish satirical jester who starred in This Is Spinal Tap and made the sublimely funny Waiting for Guffman, have reduced himself to staging these gags? It's a bit of a paraphrase. Despite his compulsion to trash everything in his midst, including himself, Chris Farley deserved better.
I have my own thoughts on this, but, I think this is one case where I'm going to let the box office speak for itself first and foremost. You look at the other Chris Farley films, right?
Yes.
The first film there, Tommy Boy, obviously that made a lot more money on VHS than it did while it was actually in theaters.
Right.
But at the same time, that made about $32 million.
Yeah. Respectable.
Black Sheep made $32 million.
Okay.
Beverly Hills Ninja made $37 million for like all these.
Hey, hold the phone.
Almost Heroes.
Yeah.
On a budget of $30 million, it made $6 million.
Oh, that's nasty.
I feel like everybody was just too depressed to watch this movie, right?
Oh.
It comes 6 months after Chris Farley's passing.
Oh, that is rough. And sometimes when hate to be morbid here, but sometimes when an actor is posthumous, that can be positive. I mean, that can lead to bigger box office.
People want to see the last thing they made.
Look at Bruce Lee in, I think he had just passed
Enter the Dragon.
Enter the Dragon, yes, had released, and that movie was a smash hit.
And, it's not like they didn't have any star power besides Chris Farley here either. I'm just going to say the person he's sharing the screen here with is Matthew Perry.
Yeah, Matthew Perry.
So Matthew Perry, who was coming off of season 4 of Friends at the time.
Yeah.
He is well into the huge success of this show.
Mm-hmm.
And even that, I think there was just a lot of people who didn't even want to give Almost Heroes a shot because the entire idea of it was just extremely depressing. And then I think, the movie, unfortunately, at least in most people's eyes, I'll get to my own opinions later, did not live up to any kind of expectations past that. Mm-hmm. It did not go any further than being, God, it sucks that this is Chris Farley's last movie.
Yeah. And, I actually want to bring up something I did last was find an interesting sort of contemporary review, in which case was Christian Bale, of all people.
You're shitting me. Christian Bale did this one too?
No, he did not.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm just going to bring up someone not quite so famous, our good buddy PhD Brooks from Letterboxd.
Okay.
Yeah, hey, listen. if I trust a comedy opinion, it's going to be the guy who runs like improv shows and has a doctorate in this stuff. I just thought that he had a really interesting little bit of insight in something of a comedic review, that because he reviewed this film, I believe, just the other year, very recently as well. To which he said, "Handful of decent yucks in here, but Farley is so constrained by the setting and the editing. There's nothing here that you couldn't get in a far better form in any of his other flicks. If I were handed the greatest physical comedian in a generation, I would simply let him cook rather than saddling him with a bunch of boomer Monty Python gags. But maybe that's why Christopher Guest is a beloved comedy director, and I'm severely underemployed in watching this on a Friday afternoon." I just thought that cracked me up. And it does reflect several of my own personal kind of opinions as well, that I think will be worth diving into. But it also kind of shows that, just like us, Farley has been a talent that I think is going to be explored and re-explored and rediscovered and broken down.
So this is your first time watching any of the Chris Farley movies for this podcast.
Correct.
I'd love to hear your thoughts once we finally get to the end of this. Before we get into that, before we get into the review, and before we even get into the DVD information, because I think we're going to need a lot of buffers here.
Yeah.
I'd like to get into the history because, well, we're easing you in, but also this is going to be the sucker punch. Unfortunately, if there's going to be a heavy part of this podcast, it is absolutely going to be in the history because, as I mentioned, Chris Farley passed away before he ever saw this movie get completed.
Yeah, and as we know, he had, even I know that, and I don't know all the details, but I do know that, the end of his life was very rough. So let's get into the history. Take it away. Educate me.
Okay, so I do want to stress that the rest of the info does come directly from the Chris Farley show book that I've been reading. I did finish it, as well as an article on Chris Farley's lost roles on the website SplitSider, unless otherwise stated here. So here's the story. Chris was unhappy about how Black Sheep and Beverly Hills Ninja went down. Although the decision to turn Beverly Hills Ninja into the kids' film did help that film save some reputation. As I mentioned, it was Chris Farley's best-selling film at the box office.
That is really interesting, actually.
And again, Tommy Boy had won an MTV Movie Award for Best On-Screen Duo between Chris Farley and David Spade. Beverly Hills Ninja was nominated again by the MTV Movie Awards, and this time for Best Comedic Performance. So, in the eyes of the public, Beverly Hills Ninja was worse received critically, but it was more well-loved by fans, or kids, I guess I should say.
Oh, we enjoyed it.
We enjoyed it a lot, too. His next big picture that he was going to work on with this was a film called Edwards and Hunt, shaping up to be Chris's first big film after Tommy Boy, really. Unlike Black Sheep and Beverly Hills Ninja, there were a lot of there was a lot of reluctance on Chris's part. Edwards and Hunt, which was later renamed to Almost Heroes, as you know, was the role that, any comedic actor would have really wanted at the time, I'd say. So it was being passed around several studios, but it was considered one of the funniest scripts not yet produced by Hollywood. It was like a bidding war.
Okay.
Kind of deal.
So you would say that, when it was going around, like, the script was so well received when it was read that lots of comedic actors, like, really were kind of angling for this part?
Absolutely. It was one that, they didn't really know the screenwriters at the time, but this was seen as an ensemble film. People who were reading this very favorably compared this to a classic Mel Brooks comedy.
Yeah, and, I can absolutely see it. That's actually something that I was going to bring up myself. Okay.
And I should stress that it was an ensemble comedy, not a buddy comedy, like how, Chris was with Tommy Boy and Black Sheep. This was technically supposed to break the mold for him.
Right.
Now, it had Christopher Guest on as director. he did Best in Show, Waiting for Guffman, and most notably, This is Spinal Tap.
One of my I loved This is Spinal Tap. Actually, one of the first R-rated movies I sought out once I became of age. I had the DVD I would check out from the library. So, it was really funny seeing Christopher Guest because I didn't quite recognize. I knew I recognized the name but couldn't place it. And then as soon as I was like, wait, This is Spinal Tap. Wait, really?
Yeah.
Which, again, seems to be the prevailing reaction.
It is crazy. Like, this is the only film of his that was not a mockumentary that he directed, as far as I could tell.
Well,
so, crazy pick for the director's chair. But, also, because of This is Spinal Tap, he was very well sought out. And you look at this film that's being
he starred. Just a quick correction: he starred in This is Spinal Tap. The director was Rob Reiner.
Yeah, he was the writer of it. Not
okay. Just want to make sure that just set the record straight.
Yeah, he wrote This is Spinal Tap. I should say he did not direct This is Spinal Tap.
Okay.
I mean, you look at this, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be directed by the guy who wrote This is Spinal Tap, and this is also going to be a film that. A whole bunch of studios absolutely love the script for this.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be a script that you would want. This is going to be like an easy slam dunk, right?
Yeah, especially when it came out. Like, it came out during the comedy boom.
And it seems like it's going to be like this big budget kind of Mel Brooksy film.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to be if you're a comedic actor, you'll want to be in here.
Right.
So among the names first attached to the film, the lead star, other than Chris, was... as I mentioned, Matthew Perry, extremely hot, coming off the heels of Friends Season 4. As for what went wrong with it, while things are going on, the cast itself seems to have different opinions. It seems like a combination of things. There were people there, including the producer, who believe it was funnier on paper than it was on film. There was a lot of criticism on how the film was chopped up to make it less of an ensemble picture and more of a buddy film to stick with Chris's other films.
I can absolutely see that.
So, Ted Dadenville, who was Chris's assistant at the time, really helped out on Black Sheep and Beverly Hills Ninja. He's actually credited as assistant to Chris Farley in like all three of these films, the last three films.
Assistant to Mr. Farley, that kind of thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
So...
I always love that credit.
They trimmed a lot of the funny things going around Chris, which ironically would have helped Chris's performance. They cut the ensemble scenes first, Matthew Perry's second, and Chris's never, is what he said.
Huh.
On top of it, they cut whole characters too, because Best in Show, the films of Christopher Guest and Company, they actually mentioned Parker Posey was in the film as an additional love interest character, but... her character just got cut during the filming.
That is heartbreaking because Parker Posey makes everything better. Like, I love Parker Posey.
I don't know if she could have made this film better, but...
Yeah, but, it would have been nice to see her.
To see her, yeah. I feel like she's the only one, maybe, who would be able to, like, stand alongside Chris and Matthew Perry, at least.
Yeah, she would have been great. She has energy. I think there's one other actor who really brings the film together, but we'll talk about him later.
Mm-hmm. So, as I mentioned, he had a few small roles after this one that he worked on, including Norm Macdonald's film, Dirty Work, which didn't release until years after Chris's passing.
We've seen that.
Yeah.
It's okay.
It is okay. I like it. I think it's good mostly as... an oddity. Like, there's not many Norm Macdonald starring comedies.
It's a good tribute to the guy.
Yeah. So, which is why we watched it
when he passed.
The week he passed.
Yeah.
So Chris relapsed hard into drugs and alcohol around the time. He was in a cycle where he had to be in multiple rehabs in less than 2 years, and none of it worked out for him. Extremely sad. As I mentioned, it started... after like a 3-year pause from drugs and alcohol, he got back into it after the failure of Black Sheep Most famously, around this time, his last couple of months, he had a small stint hosting SNL 2 months before his passing. It was said he was in extremely rough shape at the time. I don't even want to watch that episode. It feels a bit too rough for me. Although I do know there are some bits that I thought were funny that were on the Best of Chris Farley DVD. Got into it.
What were those?
So the main one I remember, you know how that El Nino sketch that I mentioned?
Yeah, the Nino.
The Nino, that is actually from Chris's final SNL.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was pretty good.
So you know how he has kind of a raspy voice during that?
Yeah.
That's noticeable even in the clip.
Okay.
It's said that from Norm that Chris had blown out his voice earlier during the rehearsal. And so that's why his voice sounds like that for the final SNL.
It's funny because I just thought he was doing a voice,
Yeah, I think he played it off very well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, the way he carried himself, he didn't look the same. It's very unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
Tragedy unfortunately struck the Farley family and the rest of the world only days before Christmas that year. 6 whole months before Almost Heroes hit theaters, Chris Farley was found dead in his apartment after overdosing from a highball. And I'm just going to say, the final couple of chapters in the book were chilling and extremely painful. In interest of keeping things light, I'll say that, the world has tried not to let his death go in vain. Chris's father, with the last bit of time he had on Earth, created a non-profit organization in Chris's name to help people who struggled with substance abuse. Mm-hmm. And when Lorne Michaels put out the SNL Best of Chris Farley DVD, which is, again, maybe the thing with Chris Farley in it that I've seen the most after Tommy Boy, a portion of the proceeds went to Chris's family after everything.
It's really nice knowing that you have kind of this connection, especially. I mean, did you know that when you got that DVD?
No, never. This was something that I learned as I was reading it.
That's amazing. And how did you get that DVD? Was it just something your father had, or?
So it was I think Adam Sandler was the first one that they had released.
Right.
At the very least, it was the first one that I saw, and everybody had that. Chris Farley was the second one that I remember them putting out, and the second one that I remember picking up because it was Chris Farley, I love him from Tommy Boy, and that was my first real exposure for him outside of Tommy Boy.
Right.
And I loved him, so.
Right. That's wonderful.
There were many tributes to him over the years. I'd say the most notable one is a song in Farley's memory by Adam Sandler. I'd recommend it. You can find it on YouTube. It shows how his close friends really looked at him. They saw him as just, a very religious, very sweet, loving guy who just unfortunately struggled with his demons. Mm-hmm. Adam Sandler went as far in the song as to say, buddy, if you were still alive, I'd bring you alongside and we'd star in Grown Ups 3.
Oh, man. It really is, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in our kind of wrap-up segment. It's really amazing how big of an impact he left on how many people. And how everyone, wishes they could just do something more with him. It really is what a talent. What a character.
People were extremely affected by it. Now, there's an account in both the book and also the documentary I remember about Chris Farley's funeral. They got people from all over just traveling in there. John Goodman just barely managed to make it at the last moment, but pretty much charged in through a whole bunch of reporters just to get to the funeral in time.
That's my guy. I love John
The one
Goodman.
person who didn't show up was David Spade, but to set the record straight on that, because it's very well reported at the time that maybe David Spade had an issue with Chris, which is why he didn't attend. He has been on record many times saying that his reason that he didn't attend was because it just hurt his soul that, his friend, his buddy who he had starred with, been together with so many times. Even though they had issues, to see him in a casket just broke him, basically.
Yeah,
He
no.
couldn't attend it.
Yeah, I mean, that's heartbreaking.
To lighten the mood, ease into the review, bring the mood up.
Yeah.
I want to talk about all the canceled Farley projects, all of which that I wish he had time to have made, but even with what we got from him, I think he'll always be a legend. I think these are more just, curiosities.
Absolutely.
Before Chris passed, he had his most serious role lined up for him in the form of a biopic about the legendary comedian Fatty Arbuckle.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, man.
And it was actually written by the screenwriter for Glengarry Glen Ross and The Untouchables,
No
David
way.
Mamet. Yes.
Wow.
So when I was first researching Chris Farley for a paper when I was in school, I actually remembered reading about this as a kid. The story is Chris saw a lot of himself in Arbuckle when he was approached with the role, and he was basically pushing himself to get it done. He was hopeful that it was going to turn his career around and he would be seen as, an actor, not just a comedy actor.
That makes a lot of sense. We actually talked a little bit in our first episode about how Chris never really got that sort of, eternal sunshine moment, that someone like Jim Carrey did, or Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler, those moments that kind of, I think that everyone, even if you enjoy the role that you've been typecast into, I think as a performer, everyone wants that little spark of, oh, this person has more than just one layer.
I think there's a lot of people who think like, well, if you're already the best comedian, why would you want to be the best actor too?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it really is that for Chris. Like, it wasn't even so much that he was ever going to move away from comedy as much as he wanted to prove that, yes, I'm a good comedian, but I can also, tear at your heartstrings.
Yeah.
And that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to prove his range.
Yeah, and we saw plenty of that in these movies. And it is funny that we also mentioned like Fatty Arbuckle and how that makes a lot of sense, because you can see so much of his classical comedy kind of chops and the people that he admired reflected in his own physicality. Buster Keaton, Fatty Arbuckle, John Belushi, the list goes on. You see these big swings that he would take. So that would have been brilliant. I think that would have been great.
I would love to have seen that too. Chris was actually set to be one of the Ghostbusters in the never produced Ghostbusters 3. That was seemed to have been about the Ghostbusters going to hell. Looking at the plot, I want to say that, the plot ended up separating into two things. I've never seen or played the things that I'm about to mention here, but from what I understand, they have kind of similar vibes. It's the Ghostbusters Afterlife, the movie. I do think it was based on the original idea for Ghostbusters 3.
Really?
Yes. The idea of, Ghostbusters passing it along to the next generation.
Okay.
That all makes sense to me. And then also the Ghostbusters video game.
Right. Just real quick, you're getting this information. You mentioned your source. I would assume that they have also collected like further sources.
Yes,
Okay.
Splitsider.
Okay.
So I did end up reading majority of the stuff also in... there's other books and articles that mention this.
Okay.
But yes.
Cool.
There is one here that I want to bring up that is a little bit shady, but I'll get to that in a moment. There's another film he was actually 1 month away from shooting. And this was actually insane because this is mentioned in the book by name. And there's almost no details about this movie, not what the plot is. There's no actual source about it. All we know is that he was going to star alongside Vince Vaughn in a film called The Gelfin.
The Gelfin?
Yes, Gelfin.
What's the Gelfin? I don't know. What's Gelfin with you?
I looked up the word, like, Gelfin. I couldn't really find anything. If you look up the Gelfin, there is a wiki article that's from, like, Fake Universe Wiki. So like, I don't want to trust that as a source.
Yeah.
The closest thing I can find to Gelfin, the word Gelfand, Glefand, which is spelled a different way, means elephant in the Yiddish language. But that's literally like the closest I can find to it. Nobody knows what Gelfin is.
This is actually the first draft of the script for The Whale. Okay, homework assignment to the few people who listen to this podcast. Figure out what the Gelfand was. Give us your best pitches. We'll produce it once we make $1 gajillion on Kickstarter.
Well, you'll find it on Patreon.
Yeah, yeah, our Patreon that definitely is going to exist one day. It's not.
Going back to one that I mentioned a little bit earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Before Mike Myers was in the role, Chris was the initial pick for Shrek. So I also mentioned Shrek and Donkey's dynamic was based on Tommy and Richard from Tommy Boy. They brought him into the studio for DreamWorks, and apparently his performance just had everybody who was there in the recording booth just cracking up, falling over like to the floor laughing.
Has any of it ever surfaced?
There is pieces. You can find clips online, but it's all just storyboard stuff.
Okay.
I want to say that there's a chance that it might get released one day, but from what I understand,
with things like the raw audio from SpongeBob recordings has started to come out recently. You never know.
That's fascinating, honestly.
Yeah, like the Shanghai.
I didn't even hear about that.
Yeah, Shanghai, the raw recording of them, just like the main cast all kind of doing their bits and doing a live read of Shanghai.
I bet Nickelodeon's very happy with them saying the word fuck over and over
Oh,
again.
yep, they say that a lot.
So from what I gather, Shrek was about somewhere between 2/3 recorded or 90% recorded by Chris. But unfortunately, even though Kevin Farley was offered the opportunity to finish the film, it was such a tragic thing. And, he wasn't over Chris's death in the first few years. He wasn't ever going to be.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it broke his heart too much for it. Chris was also allegedly going to voice a dinosaur named Sorbus.
Sorbus?
In the film Dinosaur from Disney's Dinosaur.
Oh, God, Disney's Dinosaur.
And it got changed into a different role after Farley's passing. And I'm saying allegedly because, I can't find a reputable source to back this one up.
Sorbus.
If you are listening, you can give me a behind-the-scenes look at Dinosaur. I don't want to check the DVD to see if they mention this. But, every single thing I've found, I've seen several things mentioning this story, but nothing that hard confirms it. I'm not seeing a whole bunch of people mentioning
Sorbus. It. We need to find Sorbus.
Okay, and this next one, I just want to bring this up because I remembered this one from a long time ago, reading the article, and it's just too insane not to mention here. I referenced this last episode. You know how I was mentioning a script by the name of Atuk being passed around?
Yes.
Okay, so a long time ago, I read a Cracked article that mentioned the film Atuk. It is a fish-out-of-water comedy based on a novel where a Canadian Inuit comes to the big city. And it was Toronto in the book, but it was going to be New York in the movie.
Of course it was.
Now, what's infamous about Atuk? It had been in the works since the 80s, and that's because there were several actors who were attached to the product, and they all passed away, which fueled rumors of a curse.
Oh my God.
So I'm not going to tell you, I would say don't take any of this seriously. A lot of these are, marred by tragedy, but there's a lot of people associated with this curse that you're probably familiar with.
Right.
John Belushi was going to be the first person to star in it. Obviously, that was Chris Farley's
his inspiration.
Yep. Sam Kinison.
Oh, really?
Sam Kinison was the next guy they picked.
They just really want a big dude in this.
Yes.
Okay.
John Candy.
Oh my God, of course John Candy.
Followed by Chris Farley.
God.
Also, Michael O'Donoghue passed away. He was going to be in the film alongside John Belushi. He was one of John Belushi's friends.
Okay.
And then last one, Phil Hartman. is the
No
last person
way.
associated with it. Yes.
That is ridiculous.
All these people passed away by the 90s.
This is probably the only cursed film thing that I actually believe. I don't believe it, but that's crazy.
Weirdly, it's not even the only cursed film that Chris Farley worked on.
Okay.
Because several of the same guys, like Farley and Candy, were also attached to this other film called A Confederacy of Dunces.
Oh my god, I think I know this one.
Again, this is another one of those scripts that has not actually been produced because there have just been so many different passings. But
Yeah,
I think they were going to go ahead and make it a reality a few years ago, but it just hasn't gone through.
Yes, I remember the title floating around. Wow. Huh. Wouldn't have guessed.
Yep, so that's just what we never got as far as Chris Farley films. So we have information vaguely on all of them, with the exception of the Gelfin. I must know.
Maybe the Gelfin was going to star Sorbus.
Maybe the Gelfin was the people we met along the way.
The Gelfin. It's like a girl dolphin. I don't know. I can't.
It's Gelfin. Maybe it was like a big sci-fi thing. We'll never know.
Yeah, the great ship, the Gelfin, and the Event Horizon.
Everybody, please send us what you think the Gelfin is about.
We need to know what the Gelfin is.
Before we get into our discussions on the movie Almost Heroes, I just have to ask, what is your information on the DVD and Blu-ray status for this?
Okay, so, and this is something that I did learn. I kind of hinted at it when I was looking up Beverly Hills Ninja. It is only available on DVD. The DVD does seem to be in print. I was able to find a listing on both Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You can get a bootleg Blu-ray if you on a site that will probably steal your money and your identity, so I'm not going to tell you. But no, absolutely, it has never been released on Blu-ray. Which is why it's funny that the Warner Archives thing exists, or was it Warner Archives? Well, whatever the Blu-ray for Beverly Hills Ninja, like that one exists. Again, that was super recent. I very much doubt that this one is going to get a Blu-ray release anytime soon because, as we discussed, you can rent this on Amazon. You can rent this on Amazon digitally, the standard definition version. 0 HD prints of this movie as of July 7th exist. So, listen, if they release that, this will be the first place you hear about it. Maybe on like one of our socials. We'll talk about it. I promise you. I will post an update to the Armbar Studios blog if Almost Heroes gets a Blu-ray release. But as of right now, it is only available on DVD from Warner Brothers Archive. Has closed captions. It has the trailer, apparently. And
Whoa, slow down. The trailer?
I know. Interactive menus you're going to tell me next. It does have multiple audio tracks, English and French. And subtitles, English, French, and Spanish. Or as Barnes & Noble puts it, English, Francais, and Espanol.
So, Spain didn't even bother re-recording this movie.
Yeah.
But like English, so you're telling me that, English-speaking countries and French-speaking countries and Spanish-speaking countries are probably the only ones who got this.
Yeah.
So I can't say I'm super surprised, but
it
is a film that's about American history.
I don't think I've ever seen a theatrically released movie available to rent on streaming services, but only in standard def. Like, I could understand if they decided maybe a Blu-ray wasn't worth it, but, So, hey, I don't know enough. Maybe I'll reach out to my contacts in Warner Bros. That I totally have and say, hey guys, you planning on a Blu-ray release of Almost Heroes? No. They're going to say no. No one wants this. But it is nice that the DVD exists. It's kind of like a Bride of Reanimator situation, except in that case, the Blu-ray exists like internationally. It's just impossible to get a region A thing, but the DVD is available.
I think it would be nice to maybe see like a Chris Farley film compilation.
I agree.
One of these days with Almost Heroes there. Maybe they can even include ones where he's not like a main character, but
all his
has an
starring
important
roles exist, with the exception of Almost Heroes, as high definition Blu-rays. Like, you could make a box set. 4 films is fine. Just toss in Dirty Work and you're good.
Dirty Work, Airheads, even like, he has a big enough role, I'd say, in like Billy Madison or Wayne's World 2 that you could do something. Coneheads.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Of course, another big problem. How many of these films are all underneath like the same company?
Yeah.
Because I know that Sony did Beverly Hills Ninja. Warner Bros. did Almost Heroes.
Yeah.
Paramount did Black Sheep and Tommy Boy.
So that's kind of your big thing, is that distribution means that there's probably not going to be any. And I'm sorry, even with Warner, they've been doing some great work with their physical releases. I do not think that Almost Heroes is a particular priority for them at this time.
Would be cool to have, but I say that about nearly every single film.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of distribution, this movie was funded by Turner Pictures, and I've never heard of them in my life, and I've never seen that movie logo until we started watching this.
That is weird, but so it's obviously owned by Ted Turner, right?
I don't know. Maybe it's a different Turner.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at it right now.
Sorbus Turner.
Okay, now here's the weird thing, right? I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah.
Turner Pictures owns New Line Cinema, or they owned a New Line Cinema for 2 years from 1994 to 1996. I spoke too soon.
Oh.
I'm looking into it. They also owned Castle Rock for 3 years, Hanna-Barbera for 5 years.
Is this like the only movie that they've released using their own logo?
I'm curious. That is weird. I'm thinking about it. Maybe this was originally like a New Line film that they were going to do, and then like last minute, Turner split off from it. It's like, fuck it, this is a Turner movie.
Who knows? Quick, make a new logo with a house. You got any more of the story, or are we...
That was it.
So we're going into the movie itself?
I didn't want to get in... so I didn't want to go too crazy on Chris's story, but
with the tragedy involved, I would say read the Chris Farley show.
Read the Chris Farley show. Look up the documentaries. I Am Chris Farley, or the A&E Chris Farley biography, both of which are very good. There is plenty of different ways to learn about Chris Farley's life, and the most I could say, maybe donate to help out people who are recovering from substance abuse.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah, brother.
But yeah, that's pretty much what I have here.
Okay.
It's a rough story to end it, but Chris has a strong legacy in my eyes. He's still an icon of the Midwest.
Absolutely. So I do have a few questions.
Go ahead. Oh, I should mention, like, literally as recent as like a week ago, I was talking with people because we were talking about the Sloppy Joe's segment from SNL with Adam Sandler and Chris Farley.
Yeah.
And I'm out in Ohio. It's not like this is Wisconsin, which is apparently Chris Farley land.
Yeah.
I do think that is a testament to how well remembered he is.
Absolutely. So, question about the film itself. Were you able to get anything from any of the ensemble cast or Christopher Guest or anyone to say anything? Do you know if there's like any information out there?
The big people who talked about this movie really was so Matthew Perry. Yeah. I believe didn't have a lot to say, but he was interviewed for the book. The big person who was talking about this film was actually the producer, Denise Denovi, which is the same person. I'm assuming you got the quote. I made the only bad Christopher Guest movie.
Correct. Yes. Denise Denovi.
I read that almost verbatim in the story.
There you go.
So, she was also the producer for several films that you probably know of. Heathers, Batman Returns, Edward Scissorhands, Nightmare Before Christmas, Ed Wood.
Slam dunks.
A lot of ones that Tim Burton worked on.
Yeah, some great films there.
But, she's produced stuff as recent as 2019's Little Women and 2022's The Sky is Everywhere.
Wow. Yeah, again, big names.
But she considers this to be one of her bigger failures.
Oh.
At least in terms of, how this all turned out.
Okay. So, you ready to talk about how it all turned out, at least in our eyes?
I just want to say before we go, isn't it wild that, like, both John Candy and Chris Farley's last big films are 90s Western comedies?
Yeah.
How the fuck?
I know. How did that happen? I mean, at least Chris got to finish shooting this one.
Yes, and people seem to have a lot more fun for this movie than that one. Like, I was looking at reviews for Almost Heroes.
Very different movie.
Yes. There are people who are rating Almost Heroes about 4 stars. Maybe they're not here saying, like, this is a masterpiece, but they have a lot of fondness for it. Yeah. They love how Chris portrays himself in the movie, and I want to get into Chris and the rest of the cast.
Yeah.
But, people like that one. People are generally disgusted with Wagons East, or they find it boring.
Yeah, that checks out. Here's the thing. I'm going to say, immediate thoughts in that I would not say that I'm a fan of the movie, but I would say that there is enough in this movie that I can understand someone watching it on cable as a kid or on the DVD and having some nostalgic fondness for it. Listen, I'm not going to judge you when I enjoyed Fat Albert. The live action Fat Albert movie. Loved that movie as a kid. I get it. And that movie, I think, has a lot of similar problems to this one in that it doesn't have a lot of bite to it, But I am going to be harsh on this film because I think it's worth discussing what did go wrong with what seemed to, on paper, be a very interesting script and decent concept.
To tell the truth, I was worried about watching this one, and I have no idea why. Like, okay, I can kind of understand it. Obviously, yes, Chris did pass away before this film got released, but also, it's not the only film I've seen where that happens.
Yeah.
The Dark Knight, Heath Ledger was the Joker in that. That film couldn't have been bigger. Everybody else went to go see it.
Yeah,
everybody praised the ever-loving crap out of Heath Ledger's performance.
Yeah, I remember people were angling to get him the Oscar. I think I saw it twice in theaters, I think.
By the time I learned this stuff, Chris had been dead for several years anyways.
Yeah.
I remember my parents actually were the people that brought up to me that Chris Farley died probably when I was, still young, still too young to...
Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm just imagining the end credits theme from Dewey Cox.
It wasn't like that, okay? It was like, what had happened, I was watching Tommy Boy.
That's even worse!
I just finished it. It was like, it was like still, probably either 2000-ish. I was like old enough that they were just like, hey, did you know that Chris Farley had passed away? I'm just like, I didn't really understand too much of it. I was just kind of like, huh, okay, so the guy who plays Tommy is dead. Okay. So, but it didn't really click with me because I didn't really have any real opinions of him other than he's the guy in this movie.
Right. But now as we've done the research, it's a fascinating if tragic story.
If anything, I think learning about him through SNL just made everything a lot more kind of impactful.
Right.
Tommy Boy was the only film of his that I had seen until I got old. I don't know why. Like that was my one hang up about this one. It was like I associate this one with Chris Farley's passing, and I think, judging from the poor box office reception, I don't think I was the only one.
I think that honestly, that's something that we've run into a few times. Like think about how long it took for us to kind of work up the courage to watch Paranoia Agent when it was like the last Satoshi Kon thing that we had to experience. Or think about Game of Death, which we weren't wrong about.
Yeah, Game of Death.
Game of Death, its own thing.
I would give, if for Game of Death, I feel like I knew enough about the kind of stuff that they were doing in that movie. That's going to be an interesting one to talk about if we ever get to Bruce Lee.
Yeah,
but
we'll talk about that. But what I think is, like, I do think that when someone has passed, either a creative has passed, working your way up to see, or a lot of people, Douglas Adams, after his passing, there was a book called The Salmon of Doubt, which was kind of a collection of a lot of his articles that he wrote for newspapers that also contained fragments of the Dirk Gently novel he was writing shortly before his passing. And it contains fragments. And a lot of people, I remember after I heard the audiobook of it, which was great. I loved it because it taught me a lot about Douglas Adams, and he had a lot of brilliant columns in it. But a lot of people that I read about were kind of worried about reading it because they thought, oh man, what's it going to be like when I'm reading this Dirk Gently novel? And then it just stops because it's like, oh, that's going to be the, that's when he died. When that doesn't really happen in the novel.
To get a little philosophical on you, I think maybe we should appreciate what things these people have put out before their passing, like all of it, including the stuff that maybe wasn't great or was never even finished. Like, appreciate the stuff that they did finish.
Think about, how many classical composers have those famous unfinished symphonies that are still getting played?
If it was something that for sure they didn't want released, I would understand it. I don't like them taking advantage of people after their passing to be like, or even like, if they are in no state to do it. Like, for example, the story of the person who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. Yeah, Harper Lee.
That is a horrible story. I wasn't even aware of it because no one talked about that when Ghost at a Watchman was about to come out. And then Anyway, all that to say, I think that, I understand, I think, trepidation when viewing an artist's last major work is understandable, but it's also something that we can move forward with and learn to live and learn to explore and all that. So,
folks, sorry to make this so depressing.
Oh no, let's talk. Okay, let's talk about.
We need Norm Macdonald here I feel like he would be able to like turn this this tragedy into comedy.
Okay, here I'll have to give you some comedy. I got jump scared. There's a guy named Kevin Dunn who is like a major character in this movie. Kevin Dunn, who has the same, if you're a wrestling fan and have been a wrestling fan for a certain amount of years, you understand Kevin Dunn is a name only associated with bad camera angles, zooming, and terrible, terrible things. So that jump scared me. I was like, no, can't be that Kevin Dunn. It is not that Kevin Dunn. Thank goodness.
And of course, what friends alum started films with Bruce Willis? We answered so fast that we're scary. Everybody stared in awe as we screamed, Matthew Perry. Man, not to get depressing too, man. Perry's gone too now.
Oh, I know.
God, I mostly know him for like 17 again. Like, I think this has to be like one of his only two films. Again, like, let's appreciate the fact that he got to star in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? He's a lot of fun. I actually quite like him in this movie.
It's a very odd pairing. I think it works in practice. It worked because I think he was a straight man in Friends. That was kind of his joke. He was sort of the gay who's not gay straight man. Like that was the joke. Like at first few seasons of Friends, it was like the question of is he gay? I'm not even joking.
I have not actually watched enough Friends to know this. So that's a revelation.
I've seen probably up to season 5.
Okay. You have watched so much more. I learn new things about you every day.
It wasn't even. I can't tell. The main thing I remember is just like, stray episodes. I remember the episode where George Costanza guest starred, and it was kind of like a passing the torch thing. I thought that was genuinely fun.
Yeah, that's fun. So I want to talk a little bit, actually, going on to unexpected guest stars. Principal Skinner does the opening narration. That is Harry Shearer.
Yeah, so right after what is like an opening credits where they do an almost like completely straight-faced, serious depiction of
like here's
like
your
old
soaring
school pioneer era.
Yeah, here's your soaring
stuff.
music. Your go and paint your wagon, go and paint it, good kind of style.
It's very much like something you'd actually see on public access TV right before like the really straight narration. But yeah, like Seymour Skinner, exactly the voice.
Yeah, it's just
doing
the voice.
The opening narration here. I was expecting Bart to interrupt at any second.
Yeah, it's like, hey, Lewis and Clark, those guys are boring, We're talking about this duo of two guys, Hobbs and Shaw.
But still,
that's not their names.
It was Leslie and Hunt.
Oh, yes, of course.
Again, the original title of this.
Yeah.
But that said, man, not to be like, not to do this like a morbid joke, but what the fuck, right? After the narration, you think the cast was just like burying their faces in their palms as they watched that the first scene is Chris Farley almost getting fucking hanged.
Yeah, they're like, hey, yep, we're going to execute Chris Farley for public drunkenness.
Insane that happened, and then immediately afterwards, they also have Chris's character get drunk after drinking a whole glass bottle of whiskey. It's like, Christ, dude, I know they couldn't have known, but holy hell, that is rough.
That's rough. And that scene is like one of the first big problems of the movie where he drinks it and you don't get to see him trash the party or anything. It just cuts and it's like the day after and he's drunk in the stable. And you vaguely hear that he got drunk in the stable.
It just makes everything just like so much more depressing. So maybe I'm being unfair to these jokes in particular. I did like how Chris, I think, raises his voice while he's being hanged. Or he's like, I will come back from the dead and tell everyone to kiss my hairy asshole.
Yeah, yes.
Like that was fun. But, there's... whenever they get into stuff like that, I'm just kind of like looking at this like, man,
he looks great. He looks good. There's a lot of fun costuming in this
absolutely.
movie.
I feel like they obviously didn't have a lot of budget to work with. Not everything looks right.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the fact that they even tried to do it. It kind of reminds me a little bit of an actual Mel Brooks movie.
Yes,
Dracula Dead and Loving It, which kind of also has the cheapness to it.
Yeah, and that is kind of the other issue of this movie, which, I think we can, honestly, I think we can get into it without having to go beat by beat to the plot.
No, we're not.
Because here's kind of the issue that I have with this movie.
I have a big one, too.
You keep comparing it to Mel Brooks. I'm a big Mel Brooks fan. You've seen several of his films too. We once kind of did what was it, Labor Day Brooks marathon? Like we just watched a bunch of Mel Brooks and had a good time.
And I'm not going to say that Mel Brooks always hit. I actually don't think he always hit.
But if there's one thing that, here's the thing. If there's one thing Mel Brooks did, is that all of his comedies had energy to them that is completely lacking in this film. And the comparison I kept going to was Robin Hood Men in Tights. Not one of Mel's best movies. It's funny. I have fondness for it. I saw it on cable. But it's a bit of a period piece. But in this movie, there's so much where they could be doing so much more with a joke that they just kind of don't.
It's crazy, right? Because this is basically kind of my big complaint with it. It's strange how much of a mismatch it is with everything.
Yeah.
You might ask the question, are the jokes unfunny? No, they're not written unfunny. Are the performances bad? No, they're not.
I would say that Chris feels a little out of place, and it felt like the only instruction he was given was yell.
Well, actually, I'm going to disagree with you there.
Okay.
I'll get into my feelings on Chris in a moment.
Okay.
But, I thought Chris, to me, his performance was probably my favorite.
Oh, fair enough.
So I don't think that the jokes are unfunny. I don't think the performances are bad. And you might ask the question, is the delivery bad? Because, maybe that'll be the thing that fixes it. I can't entirely say that. There's definitely some parts where, the delivery doesn't entirely hit. But I think there's good examples of all of that in the movie. I really think it's, to quote a line from Persona 4, it's impressive you managed to put so many ingredients into a dish and it came out tasting like nothing.
Woo! Good job.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. You are absolutely correct, because that is such a big issue that, I was struggling to write any thoughts about this movie because it was like sliding off my brain because of that. And again, it's not like...
It gives you like 50% of everything.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't give you 100% of anything.
You are absolutely right. And, it's funny you mentioned it being kind of cut up to fit the duo comedy mold, because that makes a lot of sense. Because as I was watching, I was like, oh, it's the duo comedy thing again. And that's what it was. Like him and Matthew Perry, decent chemistry. But that's about it, and it's like, there are other people in this movie, but
we talked about our ideas for Black Sheep and Beverly Hills Ninja. At least, in my opinion, for Black Sheep, they needed to focus on the campaign trip gone wrong. Maybe they just go to a place that is just extremely weird. They get caught in it, kind of like I'll just say, like a better version of Vulcanvania or Nothing But Trouble.
Yeah, or they could have Tu Wong Fu'd it.
Yeah,
just do Black Sheep, but as Tu Wong Fu, where they go to a place that is like very anti his brother and turn his fortunes around.
Yeah, or like, and then for Black Sheep, like our suggestion, make it a full martial arts comedy.
Yeah, Beverly Hills
It feels
Ninja.
like they didn't go enough on the martial arts aspect, and they could have done something with it.
Absolutely.
I think there's, for Almost Heroes, there's nothing to zero in on with it as far as like, something that's obviously bad. What I think is they needed to like test this out. They needed to let it play it out as is, look back on it, say to themselves, this either needs a rewrite or, more scenes, more jokes added in, do reshoots to give the movie more of a chance. Obviously, some of this stuff, we don't know how far along they were in production when tragedy happened, but like at the same time, like there had to have been some parts where they were looking at this like, are we packing enough in here? Are they doing enough as far as, performances? Are we establishing these characters enough? Are we doing everything justice?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It doesn't have the charm of Beverly Hills Ninja or Tommy Boy. I didn't find it as obviously bad as Black Sheep.
I almost hate to ask the question.
Yeah.
Do you think Christopher Guest was the right fit for this kind of comedy?
I mean, no, I feel like if they had given it to Mel, it would have been fine. Like, I think if they had just given it to Mel, it would have been one of his lower end kind of movies, but it would have been a little funnier.
This is no disrespect on Christopher Guest.
No.
He does a great job writing awkward comedies.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's why Spinal Tap worked. Yes, Rob Reiner was the director, but the script was Christopher Guest.
Yeah,
and he's done other films like it. I haven't seen Mascots, but he's done Mascots. He did Waiting for Guffman. This is a screwball comedy. Yeah. This is not a screwball ensemble picture.
And
this is not an awkward comedy.
We have seen Mel Brooks, not just with Robin Hood.
He also mostly works with his own material.
Right. No, that is true. And, I'm sure Mel wouldn't have wanted to do this, but, we've seen Mel Brooks do something like Robin Hood Men in Tights, which they really should have just grabbed that inspiration for. But they could have also watched The 12 Chairs. Like, The 12 Chairs is a pretty solid little, like very specific of the time period kind of comedy, you know?
I think even the producers at the time would have been feeling like enough of a period piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, they could have looked at some of these to get something of a period piece going. It has good sets. I like the music. The music feels very, it's the colonial period music. Like, it has a sense of grand adventure, which I enjoy. It doesn't stick out. It's no Ravenous, but it's nice. It has a bit of like I said, kind of that jauntiness of, gonna paint your wagon, and I like it. I like the jauntiness of the music.
Part of the fun with something like Blazing Saddles is like the setting and what you can do with it. And obviously, Blazing Saddles breaks away from it, and that's kind of what this film wanted to do. But it is a disconnected set of scenes. Yes.
It is skits. It just does not come together.
I have a comparison to make in a minute, but I want to go into real quickly. What do you think of just the main two?
The main two, Matthew Perry and Chris Farley. So,
yes. So, well, let's start off. You mentioned that you liked Matthew Perry.
I did. I think that he's entertaining as sort of the foppish, like, oh yes, I'm going to go on a dangerous exhibition. But I've seen that role and character done better.
Yes, and that's actually what I wanted to bring up. I feel like this dynamic was done much better over 20 years later on a TV show called Our Flag Means Death.
Absolutely.
The Our Flag Means Death stars, the very foppish pirate who's supposed to be leading his own crew, and he teams with kind of the macho mega pirate who happens to be Blackbeard.
Yeah.
Like, that is exactly the dynamic that I was feeling immediately with Matthew Perry and Chris Farley.
Yeah.
And, as soon as I made that connection in my head, I also have to compare, those two from Our Flag Means Death to these two in Almost Heroes. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, I think Chris lives up to it. I don't feel like Matthew Perry entirely matches up to it. I think he's given a very good character, and I think he's trying his hardest with it, but, I think he was probably too new to maybe film acting. He's kind of a mixed bag for me. I feel like sometimes he is incredible, but other times I just feel like he's kind of phoning it in just a little.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just a lot about this movie. There's a lot of... Roger Ebert, as we said in the Black Sheep episode, said that it felt like it was a comedy that wasn't trying to be funny because it was just too derivative. I don't get that with this movie. I don't think this movie wasn't trying to be funny. But I do think that it had many scenes that were derivative that we have seen in other movies, just like, the review from Brooks said. The big one is, and it was kind of one of our laughs when they first set out on their boat exhibition and Chris is doing his improv bit about the wild animals that he ran into as an army tracker. It's just the scene from Tommy Boy with the car crash, but it's about animals. It's like, that scene that Chris does where he starts with a hypothetical situation and just builds and builds and builds. It's like until he's like at a fever pitch ranting about fighting bears and evil, lemurs or whatever, or pumas. I think it was like pumas in the cave and, funny, not unfunny, but definitely derivative, and it's, a bit that you've seen Chris do before that isn't necessarily done better here.
So I will say, part of the reason I am so fond of Chris Farley in this movie, I think.
Yeah.
two things. One, I think the best thing that he has is his mannerisms.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you actually watch him while he's doing this, like, he's basically walking like Solid Snake, or like a Naked Snake in
Yes.
Metal Gear Solid 3. Like, he's doing like a very specific kind of walk.
I love that.
He feels like he's going to choke something at any second, which I think is fucking hilarious.
Oh yeah, no, I
And
think he's great in just how vicious and yeah.
He's a very machismo kind of guy,
Yeah.
which I like for him. It's also very different from his normal performances.
Absolutely, and that is something that I actually really did enjoy. Like during the execution scene, I liked how schlubby he came across. He came across as a lot meaner, but not black sheep meaner, like tougher. Is how I'd put it.
And then there's 3 sequences I'd say that really, to me, when I think about this movie, are probably going to give me the most laughs.
Yeah.
Looking back at it. So 2 of them involve Chris.
Okay.
There's the whole ending sequence, which I'd love to talk about that later. The other one is fairly early on. It's the campfire story where Chris is losing his head and gets Leslie to listen into the guy on camp who talks about this long story about how he got his brother to eat shit.
Yes. God.
And it's not even necessarily the story itself that's funny as much as it is Chris is fucking like losing his shit at this story. Just, he finds it the funniest thing in the world.
And it's like a really unfunny story. And to the viewer, you are clearly meant to kind of empathize with Leslie, Matthew Perry's character, because it's not a funny story, and it has like a real just nothing punchline. But Chris is just losing his mind as though it's the funniest thing, just cackling.
I feel like I watched that and the ending. I'm like, man, like if the rest of the film had this energy, I say this like several times throughout this story. Like anytime that we have a film that doesn't work, I always I can pinpoint the scenes where I'm like, man, I wish we had more of this.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to say that during this movie, there were times where Matthew Perry looked so much like Kyle MacLachlan, it was kind of distracting.
They're 2 very pretty men. That's the film that we should have gotten, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, the sequel to 17 again, where it's like 37 again, or however he was, but like Kyle MacLachlan is playing the older Matthew Perry. I don't even know if he's that much older, I'll be honest.
Yeah, they'll make it happen.
They can't now, but...
Okay, I do want to say there is one very funny bit.
Yeah.
Genuinely big laugh from me. Where Matthew and Leslie and Chris's character, what's his name? Leslie and...
Hunt,
have organized their huge crew.
Okay, I know where you're going.
And they start talking about this big exhibition... And someone brings up New Orleans.
Yeah, they're like, well, why don't we take the boat to Mississippi instead of the Missouri River? Which, that's the joke, is the Mississippi one was the Lewis and Clark one.
Right.
So they're like, well, if we take the Mississippi one, we can go to New Orleans.
Yeah. Now, here's the other thing I want to talk about. Because I think that's actually really interesting. Because I had forgotten that the Mississippi River was the Lewis and Clark one. This movie has a lot of jokes that, in the hands of someone who knew, I guess, how to punch those punchlines really hard, like a Mel Brooks, like someone who can kind of I don't know, just put their stamp on these punchlines. I think there are a lot of jokes that would have been much funnier. They're smart enough.
I don't think we talked about the actual premise as much as maybe we should have at this point for the people who don't know about it. So the idea of this movie is that Matthew Perry and Chris Farley play Leslie and Hunt, respectively.
Yeah. And they're trying to beat Lewis
and Clark. Yep.
Yeah, I did talk about that.
They have their own kind of Sacagawea And then
I do not think the Native Americans in this movie are very historically accurate.
No, they're not. However, they're kind of pop cultural depictions at the time, which I'll say that.
Yeah. So everything you think that means, means.
It's unfortunate none of these films after Tommy Boy really succeed at cultural sensitivity.
Yeah.
I don't even think necessarily Tommy Boy succeeds at cultural sensitivity, but they don't.
I mean, the only thing they make fun of is the Midwest.
Yeah.
And they're right about that.
They don't touch up enough on other cultures.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, all the other ones are sucking, unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunate.
But yeah, they start chanting
New Orleans. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Man, there's you're right. I do think that the thing that would have fixed this film a little bit is maybe somebody who has like a lot more knowledge on history. Maybe going over this and thinking of like jokes.
Yeah, there's a lot of like smart comedy, or at least attempts at smart comedy, and there's a lot of like to jump forward. There's a scene where Hunt gets a nice cleanup and a haircut and a bath, and he's clean shaven, looking great. And then he gets in some kind of fight, and when the fight is over, he's just back to his old look. But you don't really notice it. Like, it's not a focus. It's not like a bam, in your face, like, this is the joke, when that clearly was the joke. It's like the movie didn't know to focus on that as the funny bit. It
feels like maybe the joke should have been, like, he does something somehow, like, on his way to run and, like, save the gang, that, like, fucks himself up again to the point he looks exactly the same.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those weird things where, the joke's just not there, like, because, again, the person doing this, I don't think, Christopher Guest, this is a screwball comedy not being directed with a screwball comedy's eye.
No.
And it also doesn't have the intelligence that I think, again, the script read well, but the intelligence does not come through in, like, neither the madcap energy nor the intelligence that I think this script demanded really made it through. And of course, the edits do not help. It lacks confidence in the spoof.
Yes.
Which, again, was a big issue with Black Sheep, was that it just was not confident. And that's why Beverly Hills Ninja was fun, because it was at least a confident film that knew what it wanted to be.
I do appreciate the fact that this is probably, I don't know if I'll call this one of the more cerebral films that Chris has done. However, it is the one that focuses the most on jokes being said out loud as opposed to being acted out.
Yeah, as opposed to pratfalls. And some people, as mentioned, they're not fans that, you have a gifted physical actor not doing physicality. I mean, there are some physical scenes. But I really think that with a little bit of punching up and a little bit of better editing, both his delivery and the physicality and the cerebral nature of it would have struck so much of a chord rather than just kind of washing off my brain like a duck to water.
You mentioned Brooks comparing this to Monty Python, and that really is like the impression that I got, even like about like middle of the way through, is it does feel like it's trying, like if it's not trying to be Mel Brooks, it's trying to be Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which people complain about that film as mostly just being like catchphrases, and I'm not going to say they're wrong.
Yeah, but that movie at least has, again, Terry Gilliam's energy. And here's another thing. You bring up Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Here's another thing that, I look at this and I'm like, I've seen a lot of this movie better. And you know where I've seen it better?
Where?
The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Like, just in terms of that kind of tall tale fable sort of, energy in with these big sets. Now, obviously, that movie goes completely bonkers, but I'm just talking about the very basics of ragtag adventure group, tall tales, part of history, big adventure.
Yes.
Yeah.
The one thing that connects this more to Monty Python than it would a Mel Brooks one, I feel like, generally speaking, in Mel Brooks, they're still trying to follow the same story. Meanwhile, I feel like this is more or less an excuse to go from skit to skit.
Yes.
Like how Monty Python
Just
does.
like we talked about. Exactly.
Like, for example, we follow up the like whole thing where majority of the cast leaves to go to New Orleans instead of be part of the crew. Instead of part of being the crew to go to the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
With, I think I remember the joke of Chris Farley getting really mad at the guy playing the bagpipes.
Oh yeah, because it's like, oh yes, they keep the bagpipe player, and it's like, yes, your bagpipes will help us out, and and it turns out, oh, he only knows one song. That's the punchline. It's
and then from there you move on to them meeting up with the Native American tribes.
Yes, and there is a scene that did get a laugh out of me where one of they speak to the Native American tribes, and he just starts slapping Chris.
That was his character is Bent Twig.
Yes.
He's actually played by John Redcorn from King of the Hill's actor too.
That was a pretty cool connection. I love King of the Hill. So that was funny because it was kind of crazy because it was like, oh, they're slapping each other, decent bit of physical. But yeah, it's just one of those things where, then it goes to like, the tracking scene and Chris Farley smelling the buffalo poop and like, there's
a lot of shit-based humor.
Lots of poop in this movie.
Eating shit, smelling shit.
Mm-hmm.
People get shit on. Birds shit on people.
Oh, that is true. The bird does shit on someone. And then there is a scene. We are 5 for 5 in terms of nudity, because there is a scene where Matthew Perry spies on the Native American woman. There's a whole plot where they get a French pirate who kind of sneaks his way onto his crew because he claims to be able to speak a bunch of languages.
And that is Guy Fontenot.
Guy Fontenot.
Played by Eugene Levy. He does a good job.
He does a good job. He is a highlight. He's not the highlight, which again we'll get to. But basically, he has a Native American woman who is his slave, and that's all there is there, I guess. But yeah, there's a part where Matthew Perry spies on him, and
she's kind of the real love interest character for Matthew Perry's character in this.
Yeah,
I don't.
No spark at all. By the way,
yeah,
no vibe.
It's a shame. Like, I do think that maybe this was one of those things that ended up getting on the cutting room floor. But man, she does not get a lot of lines or information. She is like the most she gets is like later on in the picture. She helps Matthew Perry's character as kind of like a nurse at like one point briefly.
With like
that's
medicine.
about it. And like this, I mean, if you're doing a Lewis and Clark comedy, right? Who is the most important person in Lewis and Clark after Lewis and Clark? Like, who's the most important in that crew? Yeah. Sacagawea. So
I used to have a golden dollar with her face on it.
She should be number 3, correct?
Absolutely. Like, you need, well, again, I hate to go back to the Men in Tights, Robin Hood Men in Tights comparison, but you have Robin Hood, you have Little John, you have Maid Marian.
I have to wonder if maybe we would have gotten more had Parker Posey been in. Like, there was going to be like a conflict between the two. Probably.
I mean, wouldn't have been... I doubt it would have been interesting, but it would have had Parker Posey. So
yeah, it probably would have Parker Posey. Probably would have had the Sacagawea character would have had like something. What was her name actually? Shakina?
It was Shakina, I believe.
I can barely remember that.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of the her nude scene, there is a scene right after where Matthew Perry corpses. Like, you can tell he's corpsing in the movie where.
He's trying not to laugh.
Yeah. That's what that is.
You're using that Carney talk.
Oh, that darn Carney talk, corpsing. Yeah, he's trying not to laugh as Chris like showers him with masturbation jokes. But it's like we've seen that scene in Tommy Boy. It was better in Tommy Boy. This is no Tombstone, and it sure ain't Blazing Saddles.
They did this in the last 2 films too. Like, I swear to God, they've been chasing the high of Chris Farley making fun of people for masturbating.
Yeah.
since Tommy Boy because everybody was laughing at the Spanky joke.
But you know what they do have in this movie that the others do not? Well, okay.
You're going to say, what do they have? No, finish it first.
Bear.
No, they don't have a bear. That's a fake-ass bear. That is the fakest looking bear I've ever seen.
Fake bear. How can you say that it's fake when he kills Bidwell?
Paddington looks more real than this fucking bear.
That's because Paddington is real. He's my friend, and we're going for 11s soon. Anyway, he doesn't actually kill Bidwell.
No. He looks like so there's a scene where it seems like they were going to kill off Bidwell, but, it later got revealed that they just ate his leg.
Okay, I'm tired of talking about this boring shit. Let's talk about the best part of the movie. Hidalgo. They go to town. The haircut shit happens. They go, look, I'm sorry. They get introduced to a bunch of sex dolls made of straw. It's a weird thing. And then the best part of this movie, Kevin Dunn shows up. And he plays a conquistador named Hidalgo, and he is awesome. He's the only one, or not necessarily the only one, but one of the few people just giving 1,000% in this movie. Just absolutely great. What the hell?
Very weird that they decided to interrupt this story by talking about like a character who is basically Hernan Cortez. I didn't even know that they would have existed around the same time, but it's fun because it just immediately it made me think of the Road to El Dorado.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh man, like that. I wonder if the Road to El Dorado could have done like this idea, basically. Them always being at the throat of like Hernan Cortez, always trying to kick his ass. Like I think that was originally supposed to be the plan.
Yeah, and that's always fun. But no, Hidalgo was great. Unfortunately, the movie's kind of lack of impact sort of carries over to when they challenge Hidalgo to a drinking contest for, I think it's the idea is that Jean Fontenot, which we forgot, like we didn't notice this happened until a few scenes later, that Jean Fontenot just joined Hidalgo and betrayed them, because they then have this drinking contest, which again, it just has no impact.
I don't know if I feel guilty. Like I almost wonder if I wasn't paying attention enough. Like,
yeah.
But it was like specifically that scene, and I could tell you everything else that was going on. Like,
yeah, like
Chris Farley's character was getting a whole like makeover. Like there was a drinking contest, but it's very weird that we didn't pick up on that one.
Yeah, it was. We were like, did John Fontenot just stop appearing in this movie? Did he die? No, he just joined the bad guys. He comes back later. But, we figured that out pretty quick. But no, Hidalgo was awesome. Kevin Dunn was a highlight of this movie, which is the only time someone named Kevin Dunn has ever been a highlight in anything.
I'll admit, there's a lot of times where I would say that the cast is very underutilized.
Yes.
They introduce a whole bunch of characters, and
there's like the old man at one point, which we just haven't
there's an
talked
old
about.
man who I barely remember. I didn't even remember this was a character until you mentioned it, but he's like the third guy technically to join.
Yeah, he wants to make it to the other side, to the Pacific.
Obviously, they have Shekinah. She gets a couple scenes, mostly because Matthew Perry's character needs a love interest. There's Guy Fontenot, who we didn't realize. We just started wondering like why he stopped appearing for a moment, because every scene with Shekinah also had Guy attached to it.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, maybe they had a point with everybody else's scenes getting cut. I will say I didn't really feel as though Matthew Perry got like I couldn't tell that his stuff got cut. His stuff is probably he feels like he's the main character most of the time. I swear he's like 90% of the scenes,
which is fine. That's fine. But it's again like they kind of cut it to make it more of a duo comedy rather than an ensemble piece. And that's another thing, because then you get to the scenes where you can very clearly tell they didn't cut any of the Chris Farley scenes, because Matthew Perry gets sick. Chris Farley goes to get some eagle's eggs, and this scene lasts forever. Apologies to Black Sheep, the bat scene wasn't this long. However,
I'm not going to say that this was unfunny, but definitely lasted too long.
Yeah.
Chris eats stupid Uncle Egg's diaper pie, which is a pine cone.
God. Yeah. Chris is hungry, so he keeps cooking the eggs that he's supposed to be getting.
Hey, saying this on paper, it's actually even funnier than the scene
Yeah,
actually
it sounds funny. It sounds funny where, like, Chris goes to try and get an egg from an eagle's nest because he needs it for Shekinah's remedy to cure Matthew Perry of a disease he caught while he was in the mountains.
It feels like an actual SNL sketch, now
Yeah.
that I'm thinking on it. Like, just in the middle of it, from how it's paced, like, you get the initial joke, which is, you gotta go ahead and save this guy. He goes ahead to get the eagle egg. There's like stock footage of like the animals around, and then also like a very bad prop of an eagle,
Which is, again, unlike the bear, funny.
Yeah, no, like I feel like the half-assed nature of the eagle is genuinely hilarious.
Oh, it's very funny.
But like he goes ahead, gets the egg, cooks it up, gets like a second egg from this eagle out of the same nest. Gets attacked by the eagle again.
Hits every branch on the ugly tree.
Yeah.
On the way down.
And then it's because the second time it's because he cooks bacon and just decides like, oh, the bacon needs something extra. Let's add an egg with it. Like, I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But the punchline, he gets there. He delivers the egg. It turns out all that they needed was just the shell anyways.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, decent punchline, not delivered perfectly.
It was one of those situations where I wish the joke was shorter so that the punchline could hit
funnier.
harder.
Yes, absolutely.
But also I can understand that the length of it is probably what makes the joke so funny in the first place. It's hard. It's one of those balancing acts. But, I think that maybe the other jokes around it were funnier.
Yeah.
That it would have landed harder.
And now there are some pretty good bits after this, where I do want to say there's a scene where Matthew Perry does a slow-mo splash onto the conquistadors but misses.
There's like a splash in every one of these movies. At least two of them has bagpipes now that I'm thinking of. I want to do like a tally mark. We need like a Chris Farley bingo card.
The Chris Farley movie bingo card. Yeah, absolutely. And then of course, there was one scene where I really liked where, here's the thing. If you want to mark off your car chase bingo card spot, we have the Whitewater Rapids scene. Where they go on Whitewater Rapids.
I didn't even make the connection. You're right.
Yep. So even that. And then you have a pretty decent scene where Chris Farley does get to kind of be the serious one in this situation, where he actually gets to call out Leslie for not caring about the lives of the men, for being so obsessed with, wanting to beat Lewis and Clark that, he doesn't really care that much about the mission. And seeing Chris Farley get the responsible role is nice.
At the end of it, though, Leslie does save Hunt.
Yes.
And Hunt responds with like a hug. So even this movie has like the brotherly love.
Yeah, the
thing,
brotherly love thing, which I think is going to be a very interesting thing to discuss in the wrap up. Like, that's...
but I'll admit there's a lot of like non-payoff throughout most of it, and maybe that's because of the skit nature of this.
Yeah.
You ever notice like there was a whole thing from the beginning where they were talking about how Chris Farley's character can't read. So, Leslie was teaching him.
And
so they show like one scene after this where maybe like two scenes.
They go to the tavern and he can't read the word tavern.
Yeah, he struggles to read these words and he's getting it like super wrong.
I forgot that even
happened. And then
happened.
like after that scene, which happens about, keep in mind, middle of the way through the movie.
Yeah.
They don't reference him like wanting to read later on.
Yeah,
it feels like one of those things that should have gotten like an easy payoff later.
Yeah, it's just dropped. Like just have him like
they have him be like, his character needs medicine. You need to go to the tent and grab the medicine, or like the weapon or something.
Yeah,
and it's like
it's in a box marked. Sword, and it's like he needs to sound it out. Big hero moment.
And like that would have been like the perfect way to just cap off the storyline. We don't really get a payoff for it.
Yeah, there's no end of the arc because this movie isn't interested in arcs. It's interested in going from point A to point A to point A.
Point A to point A.5.
Yeah, probably one of the best scenes in the movie is near the end where they go to the Native Americans and he like great native warriors to help them fight the conquistadors. They just get a bunch of old ass men.
Yeah,
and then the big reveal is that the old men are actually still really awesome.
Yeah, they fucking kick ass.
They kick ass
after a whole bunch of jokes about them
needing to stop for a bathroom break in the forest, or needing to be carried to their positions and stuff. There's only 3 of them, strong like mountain, you know. But it's a funny bit, and it's a funny payoff, and a good little fight scene.
That was the other big one that got me.
Yeah.
Like, the reaction as the character, the Cortez guy, Hidalgo, just laughs at the idea of these guys kicking their ass, and then all of a sudden they just start whipping out like fucking Matrix moves. Is absolutely brilliant. Probably one of the few shreds of brilliance this film has.
Yeah. It's a funny, exciting fight scene. Like, that's the other man. I'm not going to say this has the same problems as Beverly Hills Ninja, because it doesn't, but it really is just one of those cases where it can't figure out if it wants to be a grand adventure or not.
Man, so you know how with Beverly Hills Ninja I made the comment, they kept repeating jokes? I feel like they do this in Almost Heroes too, but the worst part is some of these jokes that they're repeating aren't even funny the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like at the very least, I laughed at Holy Shinto.
Yeah, the first time.
For Beverly Hills Ninja the first time.
Yeah.
Like, the problem is, in Almost Heroes, they're going to tell you a joke like Guy Fontenot's hairy ass, and then they're going to follow it up with Guy Fontenot's hairy ass a second time.
Yeah. Or this is the one thing that just wasn't funny to me. It just wasn't a good punchline. So Hidalgo, in one of his first scenes, mentions, like, don't touch my hair, because he has a beautiful mane. And then in the showdown with Matthew Perry, his wig gets pulled off and he's bald. Like, completely bald. And, Matthew Perry calls him Baldy and defeats him in a sword fight.
Don't forget he also undoes his corset and reveals that he's fat, too.
Oh, yes, of course.
He's fat and bald.
Fat and bald, yep. But the problem is, it's just not funny. And it's not even funny in like a, well, don't make fun of bald people way. It's another one of those cases where the joke just does not have, I don't know, weight, impact. It's just kind of like,
And I have a question for you. Does this feel like a full journey that we've gone through about the point that we've been talking about?
Absolutely not. I remember us pausing the movie when there were about 20 minutes left, and it was like, oh, there's 20 minutes left.
It's like, huh.
Or 10 minutes left.
Man, it feels like I know that like this whole ideal is, skits, but it feels as though we missed out on pretty much a majority of this journey. All they really had to comment on was, they go to a saloon, they meet Native Americans, they run in with fucking Hernan Cortez, which Lewis and Clark didn't do that. Lewis and Clark didn't do that, but you get my point. Like, it's not even necessarily like, oh, I'm expecting them to do it, but it's weird the pioneering things they don't get into.
Yeah, there's no fording the wagon. There's no like, if you were to make an Oregon Trail movie, I would expect you to ford the wagon and shoot some bison.
Again, it's hard to tell what was on the cutting room floor, but if this was considered the cream of the crop of what they kept.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. Especially, this is like the least confident movie out of all of them. Because at least Black Sheep, while we talk about it not being confident at all, because, Penelope was just not a good fit for the material, it at least knew that it was going to be an adult comedy.
Yes.
Whereas this movie does not know any part of itself.
I can understand it was from the way the jokes are presented, yes, it's definitely an adult comedy. But at the same time, no, like, you're right. There's a lot of stuff that I just don't think... Well, like, this feels like it would be kind of dated material by about, like, early 1990s, and we are 1998.
Yeah. Like, this is post-Scream, man.
Not the most, like, apt comparison, technically. But I get what
you
you
know
mean.
what I mean,
Like-
right? We're getting into this world where movies are allowed to be kind of more meta, and not just more meta, but sort of, I don't know.
I believe
Grittier?
we're in like a post Austin Powers world.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah, better comparison.
It's very weird that we went back to Almost Heroes and it just doesn't land
Yeah.
throughout most of it.
So I want to talk about one thing that does land because we're at the ending. The eagle comes back, the shitty looking eagle.
They managed to catch up with Lewis and Clark.
Yeah.
They actually see them as they're heading straight to the beach to plant the flag in the sand.
Actually a good, roundabout. Yeah.
And they find out that there is the only way to get down to the bottom before them, they decide they need to run right across the rocks in order to do
Go
it.
down the cliff face. And so Hunt volunteers himself because he's like, no, you'll die. There's that sweet thing of, hey, Leslie, you can't do this. You'll die, blah, blah, blah. And
He
so
takes the flag. He goes
takes
down.
the flag, goes down. And as he's climbing down, he happens upon an eagle's nest, which was a very good.
Yeah, no, that was the
cracked us
first
up.
part. The fact that they show it before Chris's character recognizes it, I think was the part that actually made it just perfect.
Yeah.
Because you know exactly what he's going to say as soon as he gets to it. He's going to be like, "Ah, shit." And that's exactly what happens. Like, he sees the eagle again, he's like, oh, hell no, and then the eagle immediately attacks him. It's it's perfect timing. Well, one of the few times I can say that this film just lands the timing 100%.
And it's right at the end. And the eagle carries him out to sea, drops him in the ocean, It's a big feel-good ending. They beat Lewis and Clark, they plant the flag. It's funny because the opening narration says that they didn't do it, but I guess they did do it.
Man, it almost feels like I know I said there wasn't as much. There wasn't like one immediate kind of thing that I could pinpoint. I'll say, looking at the ending, there is one thing I'll talk about.
Sure.
The ending is very cartoony.
Yeah.
Like how it works is very much based on kind of like a 90s cartoon or like a Looney Tunes logic, where Chris is carried by an eagle and then drops from the sky and plants the flag after washing up.
Yeah.
And then also it's revealed at the last second, oh, by the way, the Native Americans built stairs to get down to the beach.
Yes, there's a scene where he turns around the rest of his party there, and it turns out that, yes, the natives had already settled the land, built a thing. And that again, is one of those cases of a smart joke being about, the Native Americans beating, the white men didn't discover shit, basically. And it just, I don't know. It
feels like it should have been more satirical, more cartoony. Like, if there's one thing I'll give, again, Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
Mel Brooks with Blazing Saddles was not afraid to go cartoony with it. In fact, there's literally like tributes to Looney Tunes and Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can look at Blazing Saddles, and I will say that a lot of this was through Richard Pryor and Clavon Little. Richard Pryor as part of the script, Clavon Little as Bart's actor, absolutely contributed to the sharpness of the social commentary of Blazing Saddles. I feel like they could have had more with that. Get that script, get someone to punch it up, get the Native American actors that you cast to also punch it up, to get the smart, kind of parody of American colonialism funnier, get the screwball comedy people to punch up the screwball parts, keep the ensemble cast, and you have something. But right now you got nothing.
Why is the film called Almost Heroes if they made it?
Yeah, this is the thing.
I kind of wish they kept the title Leslie and Hunt.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Lewis and Clark.
But that's more of a nitpick, but also Almost Heroes.
Yeah, again, I thought it was about
also,
superheroes,
Yeah.
But it's not superheroes. They're settlers. Yeah, no, absolutely. Leslie.
I also keep wanting to call it Almost Famous,
which is a significantly better movie.
That
movie's awesome. Well, that's the movie.
Yep. No in memory of Chris Farley, as you pointed out, which is very weird.
Yes, yeah. In the credits, they do not say unless they did it right at the beginning and we just missed it. I did not see like an in memory of Chris Farley like at the end. That feels like the most basic thing that they could have done.
It would have been like easy, you'd think.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I don't know. So that's Almost Heroes. We we've talked a lot about it, more than most people have, I'm sure. But it's a movie that I would personally place it like second to last, but
it's third.
Yeah.
Third place, bronze medal. It gets to celebrate.
Yeah, I guess, for better or for worse.
But it is. I do think this is a better film than Black Sheep. But I'm sorry, Chris Rock, you're wrong. Beverly Hills Ninja beats this film.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh yeah, Beverly Hills Ninja, the worst movie ever made. No, buddy.
You know, I'll say this was actually very refreshingly different from the other films he did.
Yeah.
So I'll give it that. It is unfortunate that, again, Hidalgo was good, but to me, Chris is the highlight.
Yeah.
Getting to see him walk around, be like super macho man. Like, I feel like, God, I wish I got to see more of this side of him.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where, I think this is a good way to, like, we call this an arc. And unlike the arcs in this movie, I feel like we should come to some conclusions, come to some discussions, and wrap, a lot of things around, like, Chris Farley, because that was our focus. We watched these movies to kind of track a line and an arc, and to track the idea of Chris Farley, to see him grow in each role, and to think about what he brought to the table here. And I want to talk a little bit first about what I found interesting about each film. We talked about the bingo card right at the end, but I think that that's actually something that each of these films definitely worked with. And whether this is Chris, the directors, the script writers, whether it's the people kind of putting these movies together saying, hey, this is what Chris is good at, let's put some Chris in here. There is absolutely, in every single one of these films, a moment where Chris is as the outcast, the goofy baby brother, the screw up, or even in this case, not necessarily the screw up, but the drunk, the I already said outcast, but that, where someone plants their feet and sticks up for him in every single one of these movies. And I think that's really interesting when you kind of look at Chris himself and his life and where he is now, or where he is remembered by society now, as someone who got a lot of crap and is being stuck up for now, even by us. And I just find that interesting. You can look at all the other things that are consistent in his movies, not just, his performance of the physicality of the say word funny, fatty fall down, but also the good as well. The sentimentality, the meaning behind it all.
I think Chris was a very flawed person.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I think it was almost impossible to, even though I know for sure he would be able to do a good job as a villain. Again, we talked about how he was originally picked for the Cable Guy, and we would have loved to see that. At the same time, I think that Chris was probably best as just kind of, the hometown hero, the lovable guy. It's hard to root against a man who finds it in himself every single week to go to church. And loves his friends with all the heart in his world. The kind of guy who, like, again, pulled in people from all over to go to his funeral.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that even though, yes, Chris had his issues and flaws. His own family will tell you everything. There's a lot of stuff that's eye-opening in the book, but ultimately positive in Chris's memory. He had so many different struggles, but more than anything, throughout all of it, you almost just felt sorry for him. You always wanted to root for him.
Yeah, and that's I think what all of these films are united by. You see Chris in each movie. In Tommy Boy, he basically nailed. You got to see what it looked like when a director knew Chris's strengths, all of them, and was able to put them on screen. You then got to see what happens when a director sees Chris only as kind of the angry, yelly, fall down man. Then you got to see someone try and take the positives of Chris in a brand new direction with Beverly Hills Ninja, with the action, kind of the action comedy, which we were very fond of. And then you kind of got to see what happened when, in both the pros and the cons in Almost Heroes, of what happens when you have, as Brooke said, one of the most talented physical actors of the generation, and then mostly give them something else. And, these kind of, quips and things, which don't always work, but, you do kind of have to respect it a little bit for the gumption to do something different. But I do think that if he had been given, if the ensemble cast roles hadn't been cut,
if the ensemble roles hadn't been cut,
we could have seen what Chris was like as a group, not as a focus, not as a duo, but as part of a whole, which I think would have been really interesting to see. And obviously, we never really got to get a serious role, but nonetheless, I think that each movie, everyone in each movie, I think, wanted to present Chris as, I guess, a force for good. Because even in Black Sheep, look at him with the kids.
Penelope talked about loving Chris and was happy to work with him again.
Yeah, exactly.
Even for all the twists and turns that movie went through.
Yeah, in Beverly Hills Ninja, the entire point of the movie is, hey, this guy may be a mess up sometimes, but he's a good guy. And I think that every single one of these movies presents Chris as a guy who will go through any lengths to pick himself back up after an incident, after an accident, after a screw up, and do his best to do right by his friends. Because that's the one thing that really stuck out with me in these movies, was that none of them were like asshole comedies. You know what I mean?
Not at all.
Again, Black Sheep was probably the meanest it got. But even then, in the end, what does he do? He does the right thing, or at least tries. And, is loved by his brother. And that, I think, is kind of the ethos of what we learned with Chris Farley, both as an actor. And will you say that he was typecast? Yeah, probably. He never really did get to do that Fatty Arbuckle biopic, which is a tragedy.
He also never got to do the Gelfin. That would have been
the
his,
Gelfin.
That would have been his...
or Sorbus.
That Sorbus and Gelfin would have been the dream.
The dream.
In all seriousness, though,
yeah.
I do love Chris. God, it would have been incredible. Even if, nowadays, again, he was doing these films that maybe people don't really like the Happy Madison stuff. I feel like the world would have been better with his presence.
Absolutely.
It is unfortunate that he struggled with very, very horrible demon.
Yeah.
That eventually took his life.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I'll always remember him fondly. I think let's just remember Chris for who he was. I think you put things extremely elegantly. So
thank you. And as a first-time Chris Farley watcher, I guess, as someone, this is the first time I've seen his films. Honestly, the first time I've seen a lot of these SNL skits, other than Da Bears. I used a clip last episode in our intro that I have just been cracking up at ever since, of just, our boys were overseas. I can't stop laughing at it. And it's like, this is the first time I've seen anything major from Chris Farley. And, he was such a talent, and he was so funny in all the tiny things that he did. that no wonder he is so fondly remembered, because if in 2024 he can win me over, even with a string of movies that we will admit are not very good outside of Tommy Boy, man, what a talent.
Mm-hmm.
What a talent. Because his authenticity, they say a lot about pro wrestling, in that even as a heel, your authenticity needs to bleed through the screen, and people will connect with that. And as a face, a good guy, they will keep that in their hearts forever. And this is a case where Chris, my God, talk about the ultimate face, where his authenticity in everything he was doing bled through that screen. Through all of his demons, through all of his issues, he really wanted to do his best. And I felt that deep in my heart. And it was nice. It was nice to explore this man's career. And good God, if we could have gotten more. And not just Sorbus.
Hey, and just want to say one more time, if this is your first episode, or if you've watched the entire, if you've listened to the entirety of this, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
We are going to continue doing arcs. I'm extremely excited about our next one. You mind if I just say it right here?
Go ahead. So yeah, we're going to be doing a new arc. Hit him.
We're going to be doing a director who I have a lot of respect for. Pride Month is continuing. We got Joel Schumacher.
Woo! I'm so excited for this. A Joel Schumacher movie, and I'm not going to tell you which one, is the movie that I have seen in theaters the most. And we'll be posting updates on what movies we'll be covering with this new arc on our website shortly after this episode goes up. You can always contact us, of course. As usual, I'll just say thank you, everyone, for watching, listening or watching. We are on YouTube. We are on Spotify. We are on Pocket Casts. Please subscribe. Check out our website, armbarstudios.com, for more information. Feel free to contact us. We both have Letterboxd accounts. I'm Hard Luck Aaron on Letterboxd, and Mandy is NB Witch. Leave us a comment here and there. And you can also, of course, find that information and other ways to contact us on our website, armbarstudios.com. And in the meantime, we are very excited for the Joel Schumacher arc. So take it away.
Until next time, 3, 2, 1, roll credits.
Actually, Matt, I kind of want to be a writer.
Well, Lottie frickin' da! We got ourselves a writer here!
Roll Credits is produced by Armbar Studios and is part of the Aaron and Mandy Network. The intro and outro music is provided by Daniel Vodovos, available on Bandcamp. For more information on all of our projects, visit armbarstudios.com.